The left can't help themselves. They are completely incapable of any type of restraint. You give them any inch, any room, and their authoritarian nature will always expose itself. You better do what we say, or else you will suffer the consequences. You better bow down before us, or we're going to destroy you. They're always engaged in issuing threats anytime there's any possibility that anybody might actually just disobey them ordering what you should do. And nothing highlights this more than what we are seeing going on with the conversation regarding upcoming Supreme Court cases. Cases that the Supreme Court are going to hear over the summer and into the fall, but won't be decided until about early spring next year. And the left is already issuing warnings. Hey, you better rule how we say. They're not going off and saying, hey, you better rule based off of what the Constitution says. They're not saying, hey, all we need from you is to follow the law. No, they're saying, you better rubber stamp a decision on our side or we're going to destroy you. Now, they first start off with this conversation trying to go off and say, hey, this could polarize the election and create enthusiasm on both sides. If they rule in favor of Republicans, then this could motivate a better turnout for the Democrats. However, if they rule in favor of the Democrats' position, then this could further polarize and motivate Republican turnout. But then they can't help themselves. And then listen to the last statement.
The Supreme Court takes the summer off. These two cases will be argued in the fall. Decisions will come in the spring or early summer of 2022. Should the court adopt conservative positions, that might remind a Republican base of the importance of White House control and spur a GOP turnout which retakes the House and Senate. Or it could motivate women and the young, which would advantage Democrats. But if you're gaming this out, there's one more consideration. Conservative rulings on abortion and guns might convince the president and Democrats to shed any reluctance they've had about expanding the size of the Supreme Court so as to counter the current ideological imbalance, which will otherwise likely continue beyond the Biden years.
Now, first of all, you got to love the narratives, love the spinning that they do there. Well, if you're a leftist, you love the narrative, but they are good at spinning narratives. So they go, if they rule in favor of Democrats, that means that women will automatically be cheerful and support it, and the young, as if it's automatic that this is an issue that women and the young really want, that women automatically care about abortion just because they're women. There are actually a lot of women out there who are against abortion. They understand the evils of abortion, but they frame it as kind of a man versus woman here, because they always have to engage in identity politics and assume that if you belong to this one identity group, that you automatically agree with leftist position. Or if you're within this age group, you automatically are a leftist according to them. And they frame that narrative as part of trying to say that, they agree with them, that they're on the side of the majority, or that they're on the side of, pick the group, and that if you don't do what we want, you're going to tick off this identity group and they're going to rise up against you. But there's always the possibility that that group actually agrees with conservatives, and that there is no situation in which all members of the group actually agree. In fact, you could have the majority of women who disagree with abortion, and the left will still claim that because they're women, that they automatically support it. They're always going to keep up with that narrative. Now, what I really want to get to here is the threat that the CNN just issued, which is, you better do what we say, or else we are going to pack the courts. And we're going to destroy any faith and credibility left in the court. And we're going to pack it with a bunch of radical activists that are just going to rubber stamp anything and everything that we want to do. So either you bow down to us, or we'll destroy you and pack you with people that will just rubber stamp us anyways. It's a I win, I win. Heads I win, tails you lose. That is what the claim is. Do what we want, or we'll pack it with people who will. There is no scenario in which they're going to allow this. Now, they always try to say the ideological imbalance. Take a look at that phrase, ideological imbalance. The Supreme Court is made up of 9 people. an odd number of people. By definition, there's always going to be an ideological imbalance. There's always going to be one side that has at least at the bare minimum, one more justice than the other side. And as presidents change, party and belong to different parties, Republican presidents, and then we go Democrat, then we go Republican presidents, whatever, there's always going to be a change in the ideological shift of the Supreme Court based off of who's president at the time an opening opens up. But they want to act like this, like there being an ideological imbalance as a result of an odd number of justices is something new, or that it has somehow radically changed or is unprecedented, when it's not. There's a normal shift back and forth because of who nominates the replacement whenever there's an opening and who happens to be in office at that particular time. But they want to act like this is somehow new, that the courts have been fundamentally altered, and so they need to counteract that alteration. No, what they are saying is, we don't like the fact that through the regular normal process, the Supreme Court now has a majority of conservatives when we want a majority of liberals. So therefore, rather than continuing along with the process that has been in place since forever and outlined by the Constitution, we're going to try to find a way to change it. We lost, and it's going to be a long time before we're going to be able to change the ideological makeup of the Supreme Court. And we don't want to wait. So instead of continuing on to the process, we're just going to change the whole thing. And this is the Democrats' issue every time. They will always argue and support something until it no longer is in their favor. And then they'll talk about reforms in order to rig the system, re-rig it into their favor. They don't want to play by the rules. They just want to make up the rules as they go. And they want to go through and make sure that the court will always rule in their favor, which means they're going to make sure that, if right now there is a 5-4 split, and let's face it, John Roberts is not a conservative. He is a liberal. He sides with the left almost every single time. So we got a 5-4, a 1-vote majority, supposedly, on the Supreme Court. Well, they need to counteract that. So what would they do? They would put on another 5 justices, making it a 5 votes to, 9 votes? 5 to 9? So that, therefore, there would be a dominance of the left. In which case, you pretty much make sure that the conservative justices are irrelevant and have no influence in the outcome of any cases. That it's all the left. And of course, it's going to be a court that will rubber stamp. And they want that. They want to rig the Supreme Court and pack it. That way, when they go out there and violate existing laws that they don't have the political power to change, or worse, when they go out there and blatantly violate the Constitution, no one's going to hold them accountable. If they pack the courts, that means they got the White House, the legislative branch, and the Supreme Court, and they pack the courts, and then they go out there and massively violate every aspect of the Constitution. Well, what are you going to do? You're going to take them to court? They've already rigged the courts with a bunch of activists, and not through the normal process. You go through and you take them to court and you point out, and no matter how much you show them, the Constitution blatantly forbids them from being able to do this. The Supreme Court is going to be, we disagree. We believe that the Constitution allows for the Democrats to do anything they want. And have you ever noticed that the power of the presidency really seems to shift? That Democrat presidents, according to the left and the courts, have more authority when they're in office than what Republicans have when they're in office. That the Democrats are able to exercise more power and authority. I'll give you an example, DACA. So Obama implements a DACA, basically, usurping the power of Congress to initiate a new law that overwrites existing law that was passed by Congress. And they go through and they take it to the courts, and the courts say, it's prosecutorial discretion. No, it's not a law, it's prosecutorial discretion. So he can decide not to prosecute them and give them legal authority or legal ability with visa to be able to stay in the United States and get jobs. But then Trump gets into office, sees that, writes in an executive order that all it does is repeals Obama's executive order. And they say, no, you can't do that. No, you don't have the power and authority to do that. You can't do that. So one president, a Democrat, writes up an executive order using only the authority of the president to initiate a new law. And that's fine. They have all the power to do so. And then the succeeding president comes into office and just repeals the executive order using only the authority of the presidency. And they say, no, you don't have the authority for that. And they do that through the courts. The courts have already, heavily left. And they've already decided that if a Democrat does it, they have the power. If the Republican does it, they don't have the power. That a Democrat's executive orders have more authority than a Republican's executive order, even if the executive order by the Republican is just a repeal of the Democrat's executive order. But the Supreme Court, now being in, supposedly constitutionalist conservative hands, would look at that and go, hey, wait a minute, if you have the power to implement this, then he has the power to take it away. Or, hey, this blatantly violates the Constitution. It's an obstruction to the leftist agenda. So they can't have that. So now they're going through and saying, hey, you better do what we say, or we're going to pack the courts with people who will. And if they do that, then there is no hope for democracy or constitution. No hope whatsoever. Because if they packed the Supreme Court with a bunch of radical left-wing activists, they'll just rubber stamp and declare anything the Democrats do is constitutional, even if the Constitution blatantly, in plain languages, forbids it. And the Democrats being so open, the left being so open about their threats to the Supreme Court, if they're that open with their authoritarianism now, imagine what would happen if they had sole unquestionable, or not unquestionable, but sole unobstructed authority and every check and balance controlled by them. Imagine what will happen then. It'll be Venezuela, it'll be Cuba. In fact, it'll make what happened in Venezuela and Cuba small potatoes compared to the disaster and the tyranny that the left will rain down on the rest of us.